Evening wherever you are. We'll just hold on a few minutes while people join, and we'll get started shortly. Thank you. Hey everyone, thanks for taking the time to join the call. This is Chris Herbert. I've got Gabe Smith here with me. Um, Good morning. Um, so I appreciate everyone joining. As most of you know, just continuing the Silicon Valley pricing series of webinars talking about different issues and topics within the pricing field. So I appreciate everyone taking the time out of their busy schedule to join. So today we're going to talk about the future of pricing with Gabe Smith. He's got over 15 years of experience in consulting, pricing, sales, product management, and enterprise software. He's worked with some of the leading companies like Cisco, IBM, Seagate, Toys R Us, Emerson, to name a few, helping them improve pricing, operation models, products, and productivity. So he's got a great understanding of where the industry is going, especially from a software standpoint. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Gabe and let him take it from there.
Okay, thanks, Chris. So today, what we wanted to talk about was the future of pricing and where it's going. So I thought we'd start off by talking about some of the trends that are shaping the future of commerce and of the pricing industry. And within that, as we talk about those trends, we'll also talk about some of the implications for pricing, and then also how pricing solutions are evolving and have to evolve in order to meet those needs. Then we'll shift gears a little bit and talk about the impact on organizations overall, and then I'll hand it back to Chris, and he'll talk about kind of the evolution of the pricing discipline, and how that's shaping up. And then we'll open it up for questions at the end, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, I'll be monitoring questions throughout. So if questions come up, and if you guys want to ask, I'll try to work them into the conversation the best I can. And if I can't, I'll bump them to the end and we'll answer them at that point. So feel free to ask questions or reach out at any point.
Sounds good. All right, so let's get into it. So I've got 5 trends here, and what I'm doing here is talking about each of them. Up here, kind of what the trends are, and then down here about some of the implications to the pricing discipline. So the first trend really is the commerce revolution or evolution, depending on how you want to look at it, that's happened in B2C. And this is really, I know a lot of people on the call here are more B2B pricing. We actually at Pricefx go across both B2B and B2C, so we get to see kind of a unique perspective on some of the trends and how they're playing out. And what's happening actually is this revolution that's happened in B2C is starting to manifest itself and take root in B2B as well. When you look at kind of what's happened, I mean, everyone knows kind of what's happened, in B2C pricing with Amazon, but it's pretty staggering when you look at some things like this. You look at, for example, Amazon's market capitalization versus Walmart, Target, Best Buy, Macy's, Kohl's, Nordstrom's, JCPenney's, and Sears, and they're well above all of those put together. Digital commerce generally is growing quite fast. It grew at 15.6% in the U.S. in 2016. 42% of retail growth was digital, and Amazon itself captured 43% of that growth. So obviously that's been a huge impact and kind of a revolution there, and I would say that a lot of the trends there are going to continue in B2C, but also start manifesting themselves in B2B. So this distinction of B2B versus B2C is fading somewhat. You've got more vendors that are looking at and contemplating going direct to the consumers, which obviously has implications for both retailers and distributors. Obviously that will cause channel conflict. But it's almost unavoidable. When you look at some of the surveys that have been done, customers have indicated that they have a higher willingness to pay to do business directly with a vendor than they do to do business with a distributor or a retailer in many cases. So the writing's on the wall there, and it's almost unavoidable in terms of the direction that this is going to go in. It also means that if you are a retailer, you are a click and mortar, and I'm saying click and mortar here basically because I don't believe that there's going to be any true brick and mortar only establishments going forward. So click and mortar meaning that you both have online and offline. In order to compete against the disruption that a digital only model like Amazon is causing, really what you have to do is create better experiences than what Amazon can. And you have to add unique value. So as a distributor, you have to really understand your customers, get embedded into the value chain there, understand their business, and be able to add unique value. And that value obviously varies depending on what industry that you're in. But both for retailers as well as distributors, you really have to understand what customers do value and create those experiences and add unique value in addition to your offer or your product. Sometimes that's around services. Sometimes it's around the buying experience. Sometimes it's around unique industry knowledge and in-depth knowledge of the industry that you're serving. Sometimes it's around fulfillment methods. So one of the things that Walmart, for example, has done fairly well is have this mixed mode model where over half of their online sales are actually picked up in store. So if you have a large brick and mortar presence, you can leverage that from a logistics standpoint and and actually bring items to your customers faster than Amazon can in some cases, for example. So this is also feeding into the next trend, which is,
well, and just to jump in, I think that that's a great point as far as B2B, where I've spent most of my career, is, I think well behind B2C world, and we need to take some learnings and some of that and really apply it to our business, or we're just going to fall behind our competition. So
yeah,
I completely agree.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot to be learned there, and and I would agree with you. The B2C and retail, generally is more sophisticated with regards to pricing and managing pricing and using different techniques like algorithmic pricing and optimization and competitive data and things like that. They do have some. It's easier in B2C in a lot of cases because you have more transparency in terms of pricing. So you have more data, and that's one of the reasons why it's become more sophisticated. But that transparency and that data is starting to amass in the B2B realm as well. So it can definitely be leveraged. And I think to your point, we always want to learn from the best practices across industries, and generally in pricing, there's a lot that applies across different industries and different routes to market if you know how to leverage that.
Definitely.
So as I was saying, this kind of feeds into the next trend, which is really around omni-channel strategies. So when you look at companies that have competed well against, let's say, Amazon, because they are the big disruptor in the B2C space, the way that they've done it is by having, understanding where their unique value lies, where they can create these better experiences, and having a unified omni-channel strategy. So first, it starts by understanding all of the paths that your customers can take to get to a purchase, right? And that's not always very clear. It can be different depending on the consumer, and even depending on what it is that they're buying. So that could be online, in review forums, in comparison shopping sites. It could be in the store if you have an in-store presence. It can be obviously dealing directly with salespeople or customer service people as well. So understanding and kind of mapping those journeys and the paths that your customer is taking to your kind of buyer personas is really key as a first stepping stone to developing a good omni-channel strategy. So understanding the paths and the touch points, and then basically positioning your offer to maximize the value or the perceived value along each of those paths, and managing that perception with regards to reviews, with regards to your price, and how you're positioning yourselves against your competitors is really key. And then having this kind of an omni-channel pricing strategy that makes sense, right? So the last thing that you want to do is have a multiple channels where you might be quoting business and you might be selling online, and to be quoting business to a valued customer that may be one of your biggest customers, and then they go online and see a price that's lower. I was consulting for a customer one time that the whole price optimization project had been really accelerated because their CEO got a call one day from one of their biggest customers that said, "Hey, I'm supposed to be getting the best price on this product, and I went online and I saw it at a better price than I'm getting, and I'm spending millions and millions of dollars with you. What's going on?" So that really is becoming more and more key as vendors are experimenting with different channels and different routes to market, that you have the ability to be consistent across all of those channels.
Yeah, and I think this is a frustration, for at least for myself when I was in a pricing role, was getting all that data and getting all that information and what was going on. A lot of times as pricing professionals, we're having to try to beg, borrow, and steal sometimes to get all this incoming data so we can understand it all. So I think this is really truly key in the information and how a pricing professional really needs to understand the holistic approach, and be able to not only have the data behind it and understand that, but also kind of have the time to go out and get in front of the data and understand the buyer paths and all that kind of stuff. And too often we get stuck behind the data and are just looking at it. So
yeah, and so once you have that hopefully you have the view of what's going on, and in order to develop a good strategy, you do have to consider all the stakeholders, and you have to realize that, some are going to win and some are going to lose. So if you have, people along the value chain that are making, more profit than value that they're adding, then those are going to naturally be the losers. And you can't be scared to innovate or to try new things, because of channel conflict, right? It's going to be, add value or perish, right? Like I was saying with the distributors and the retailers, that's something that they're going to have to realize as well. And if they don't, frankly, they're not going to be around for very long. So, I would not. I think too many companies have been fearful to try out new routes to market and new channels because of this perception that they're going to upset their established distributors and channels. And obviously there's that makes sense, but at the same time, if you don't do it, someone else is going to, right? So that's something that you just have to grapple with and figure out a strategy that makes sense. And hopefully you do have folks that are adding enough value along the way that they can, earn a profit and earn a living from it. And then the last point here is really around alignment of process, peoples, and systems. So at a lot of companies, you've got different organizations and different processes and different systems even that are used for pricing in different channels. So you might have a sales team that's using Excel or a CPQ solution to quote to direct customers. You might have customer service that's using kind of an ERP or order management system and maybe a CRM system when customers call in. You've got, someone else may be managing the e-commerce pricing strategy, maybe another person managing some of the off-invoice discounting or promotions that are going on. And so having been in some of these organizations and seeing, how disconnected these things are, I think that, that's going to really present challenges if you're competing against someone that has a clear omni-channel strategy and has that alignment and really can move with speed and agility. And so I think that's part of the, I would say the takeaway here would be that, driving towards that alignment from an organizational perspective, but also having the right systems in place to be able to get a hold on, this omni-channel pricing strategy and the tactics that go along with it is really going to be key in the future to compete.
So there's a question about say more past the purchase makes sense, but can you put some more color into it, kind of enterprise customers and what the different channels are? Maybe just kind of quickly go through some of the channels just to get some basic.
So I started off my career at Cisco Systems, and we actually sold a large percentage of our business was through channel partners. So we did sell direct, but actually only about 10 or so % of our business was purely direct. We also sold through value-added resellers. So this is very typical in high tech, not as much necessarily in other industries, but in other industries, you've got people that are doing projects that are, for example, using the materials or the supplies that you're selling them in the context of another project. So those could be a different type of value-added reseller as well. Then you've oftentimes got distributors that are selling to either smaller resellers or directly in some cases to consumers as well. Then you've got the retail channel, obviously, where you've got people going into stores and buying things, and you've got e-commerce where people are selling directly now online, and that's increasingly prevalent. So when I say omni-channel, it's really obviously depends on what industry you're in terms of which of those channels it makes sense. But you could have any flavor of 1 or 2 tier, or even sometimes 3-tier distribution channels going through partners. You can have obviously the direct kind of sales model where you're quoting on a for your larger customers, quoting business directly or doing contract and that kind of business, and then the e-commerce channel as well. So the point is that not necessarily to try to force fit new channels into your industry if they don't make sense, but if there are people selling in other channels, like there's more people that are looking into, for example, as as vendors selling, on Amazon, on marketplaces, or selling directly, with their own e-commerce, solutions. So I think that's something that is becoming more prevalent, and it will continue to gain traction because, frankly, if you're selling directly to customers, you're making more money, right? And if they're willing to pay you even a higher higher price than what they're willing to pay a distributor to buy that same product, then it's almost unavoidable that you're going to be drawn in that direction.
Or even just your salespeople, or the race to the bottom that happens a lot of times.
Right.
Versus going direct to the customers and truly seeing what they're willing to pay from an e-commerce standpoint sometimes can give you a whole different outlook on what the value is to the customer.
Yeah, so for sure. So I hope I answered that well. If not, I'd be happy to take it offline and talk in more detail about it with you. So that kind of leads, actually, speaking of sales, and the kind of change of some of the channel dynamics here. One of the trends that you're seeing is this one that I call death of a salesman, right? So the order taker type of sales reps that aren't adding necessarily a whole lot of value are a dying breed, right? So there's a continuum of different types of salespeople out there. At the lower end and the most simplistic, it's the order taker. Like, I need to call this salesperson just to get an order placed, right? And I think you had a good story about that one, Chris. You told me the other day.
Yeah, as a pricing professional, as I'm sure a lot of people on the call, whenever I go to buy a product, I look at it from, okay, how would I do this? Kind of what's the buying path, all that kind of stuff. So I was doing a trial of a product recently, and I've gotten so used to being able to buy online. I don't want to, as most people do, I don't want to deal with a salesperson. So I was looking around. Okay, I was doing the free trial, and where's the upgrade button? Where's the buy now? Where's the pop up encouraging me to buy? And was kind of looking for all that. And I had to search around for how to buy it through the product versus I was at the same time was getting an email from a physical salesperson trying to sell me the product. So instead of having pop-ups or buy now button, they were having a salesperson email me for a simple sale, which just made very little sense to me at that point in time. Why, use an example of a seat, why selling one seat of something requires a salesperson to reach out for something I was willing to pay full price. And I think, it just doesn't make sense for a lot of companies to be paying salespeople to sell a product that should take a product development team, be far less expensive to build in and really kind of just go with a more, save the salesperson for the more complex sale.
Yeah. So when you factor that, those kind of considerations and that people are getting used to buying more online, and you look at, for example, the fact that the B2B pricing that's offered on Amazon is starting to get to the point where it's I think about half the time right now it's actually better than the contract prices that people are negotiating. And then you look at the sales activities that are being automated by software and artificial intelligence, like, for example, CPQ and e-commerce are kind of coming together and merging. And so, you're getting this this trend where a lot of the sales activities that were done by salespeople in the past are starting to go away and become automated. So the need for those order taker type of reps is going away, and that's going to continue to move up the chain. There's always going to be a need for solution oriented sales reps for more complex deals, and obviously for bigger customers and bigger deals where there's more considerations. But even that's going to a lot of the heavy lifting that goes along with that is starting to be automated, right? So that's where you're seeing, and you'll continue to see decline in the amount of sales jobs that are out there. So basically, what you're going to see here is you're going to see fewer sales reps and fewer quotes. You're going to see fewer deals desk roles. So the pricing roles that are associated, that are usually part of sales or sales operations or finance, and you're you're going to see a decline in those and continue to decline in those. The deals that do come across are going to be the bigger ones and more complex ones, right? So while you'll see a lower volume, you'll see an increase in complexity, and it's going to be more important that you get the price right. So when you are negotiating a deal, in a lot of industries, they don't pay too much attention to the list pricing or to the catalog price, because everything gets negotiated, right? You're negotiating either a discount off of that or a net price specific to that customer. Well, in the environment that we're talking about, where you get less contractor quoted business, and it means that you have to be more accurate and better with your pricing, because you might not ever even get that call or get that quote in if someone goes to Amazon and can buy it for a price that that they feel good about. So, or one of a competitor that's doing better job at dynamic pricing and getting it right to begin with. So that's really some of the trends that are influencing the future, I think, as well, with regards to sales and their impact on pricing.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, we need to have that better price up front, and so many people want to buy now and they don't want to deal with a salesperson. So we need to give them that opportunity, give them those channels, and really just make it easier for them to buy in other ways.
Okay, so the next one is really around subscription pricing, this really started off in software, and I have an example here from Salesforce, one of the the pioneers in the subscription pricing and software as a service realm. Obviously, Pricefx is also a SaaS company that does subscription pricing. So I'll give you an example of ours as well that I know a little bit better. But this is moving into other industries. So there's companies, like industrial manufacturing companies, chemicals companies, all kinds of companies are experimenting with this as a way of, one, getting more predictable revenue. Customers like it generally because it's more predictable costs on their side as well. And as long as you can align it to the value that they're getting out of it, generally you can create a win-win situation. You can combine this with more traditional models as well. So, for example, Amazon Prime combines a subscription to get free pricing. You still pay for the products that you buy, but really that creates an incentive for you to keep going back to Amazon and actually not compare the pricing as much with other vendors. So Amazon's becoming the de facto standard search engine for product pricing in a lot of industries, and that's really Prime has been huge in their ability to do that, to really reshape things, and that's kind of some of the other players in the industry's worst nightmare, like Google, for example, is that that Amazon continues to do that, and they get less and less traffic for searching for products or pricing and things like that. And then there's this trend now to move away from just kind of software as a service or something as a service, and really to value as a service. This was something that I think Gartner had published in 2016, that it was kind of the year of moving beyond software as a service and moving to value as a service. So I think this one is obviously, as pricing professionals, we all are general proponents of value-based pricing, right? And insofar as it relates to subscription, that is really the holy grail, right? So if you can align your offer to the value that the customers are getting from it and bring it in at a price point that they're willing to pay, you've got a situation where you can maximize your own profitability and provide the most value to the customer. So
I mean, yeah, I think we're seeing companies and smart pricing teams actually be able to increase the overall price of whatever it may be, by moving to that kind of value and the subscription-based model, because they're aligning the value, they're aligning the way customers are willing to pay. They're taking away that initial sticker shock. You see it with cell phones now, where you're paying monthly, and you're seeing it with even tire companies are looking to kind of do it as a per mile charge, instead of that kind of big upfront cost. But in the end, they're actually getting you to pay more. You feel better about it, and so it really is kind of that win-win situation where if you're doing it right, you can actually increase the price and customers are happy about it. So I think it's a very interesting kind of time for pricing professionals and be able to understand the value. What is your customer, you know, what does your customer want? What are they willing to pay for? How
Right.
can you even get them to be willing to pay for more?
Right. And particularly like in that tire example, that's a good one because you are aligning to what drives value. So a longer lasting tire is driving more value for the consumer. They may not be convinced by your sales pitch or by your marketing that it is going to last 20 or 25% longer. Uh, but if you have a model where it basically costs them, nothing to try it, and if it lasts the same amount of time, they pay the same price. But if it does last 20% longer, then they pay 20% more or 15% more, then everyone wins, right?
Yeah.
So that's a way that you can turn, innovation in product and use kind of this innovative pricing strategy to capture more of that value that you're providing. So that's a great example. So the challenge here though is that if you're in kind of a more you know traditional model and your processes and systems are set up around more of like a product-based model, for example, it's really a challenge. I mean, this is something that we started looking at Cisco in the early 2000s, actually, because we did believe that managed services was going to become, more and more prevalent. And we started looking across our whole quote to cash process and all our systems and sales compensation and everything. And it basically touched every single process and every single system in quote to cash. So it's certainly a massive undertaking, but some of those things can be made easier by putting in some additional kind of systems in place that allow you to work around some of those potential drawbacks or limits of your current systems and process. The second point here is that you really have to understand, to do this right, you really have to understand what your customers value, right, and how to package these things. So there's a lot of companies that have had a huge impact on their revenue and their profitability by kind of repositioning their offers, by doing studies to really get close to their customer and understand which of these features and benefits or what drives value with the customer, and how to package those to kind of get to the right mix of products that you want to for the right set of customers. You also have to understand your customers and their segments as well, as another kind of dimension here. And it does create a lot of new use cases. So it's with renewals and trying to map usage to billing and to what they're paying and things like this. So it does create a set of challenges, but frankly, this is an area where new players can come in that are unencumbered by some of the challenges that the existing ones have, and really disrupt industries. So it's certainly one to consider, whether you're a new player in the industry or an existing player in the industry, in terms of, and that's why you're seeing a lot of very old line established companies try things out, like GE with things in this realm. Because they understand that really it can be, a force for disruption, just around pricing, right? So I thought this was an interesting one for this discussion, because it frankly is one of the areas where you can really use pricing as a competitive, weapon. Just not even necessarily the pricing, what the price is, but how you price it and how you align to that customer's purchase behavior and what drives value for them.
So, I mean, I think in a key here too, especially with the new use cases, companies really need to align purchase data with usage data for this type of model. You need to understand, at what price point a person's paying and what they're using for within the product, especially if you're talking about different features and functionality. You need to not only, understand at the beginning when you're setting up those packages and those bundles, but especially for established companies, you need to understand how people are using your product and really kind of take that competitive advantage that you have and invest in bringing that data together. Because if you're not truly understanding how a person is purchasing and using your product, you're kind of doing yourself a disservice. And far too many companies companies that I've been at, just they're not at that level of sophistication, and they're not really using the data to their advantage like they could or even should be doing. And I think that really is where we need to get to really take advantage of the subscription-based model, because without that, you're really not maximizing kind of your potential profit and your pricing to the best of your ability.
Yeah, so I'll give one example here of that we've done here at Pricefx, and it's called pricing as a service. So this is something we came out with this year, and what we wanted to do was really further reduce the risk for our customers. We feel like in general, our mission is to grow the market with regards to the companies that can afford to put in pricing and price optimization, CPQ. So we're constantly trying to innovate and come up with new ways to further reduce that risk and further grow that market. So we came up with this idea late last year, and we rolled it out at our customer summit in April in Prague. And the basic idea is that we're going to get away from licensing modules and then quoting implementation costs, and we're going to basically quote solutions that solve business problems, right? So price setting and analytics, for example, and having specific scope around managing list pricing and what types of analysis, and break those into kind of 3-month chunks and be able to implement them quickly, show the value, and license them based on that value that they're providing. And we've taken then the CapEx and completely away from it. So that's a big barrier to a lot of companies, especially if you're a smaller company or a smaller group within a company that wants to get started with something and show value. A lot of times coming up with a lot of capital expenditure it can be challenging. So now we can do this completely without any setup or implementation costs. So we've kind of aligned to that need. And then and since we're licensing per solution and per value, it's easy to show the ROI, and we also have flexible termination terms, so you're not signing up for a big commitment to a long period of time without seeing the value that it's driving.
Yeah, I mean, to tie this back into the prior slide, I think it's really kind of understanding the customer and truly being able to relate to it. I mean, from all the research I have done, and I'm going to start publishing. I mean, these are the main issues for pricing professionals as far as they're concerned. Is number one being price at being price, that we're just kind of as an industry scared off by the past behavior of pricing products and the $1 million+ price point that wasn't feasible for a lot of teams to handle, or even anywhere close to that number, and then the concern of the implementation taking too long to show that ROI, to where a lot of pricing professionals were losing their jobs and or gaining jobs because someone else lost their job because they didn't show that ROI and that big upfront expenditure. So I think that really kind of ties into understanding a market, trying to bring a solution and a price point that works for that industry.
Good insight, thanks. All right, and then the last trend here that I'll talk about is and it wouldn't be complete, obviously, if we don't talk about artificial intelligence or machine learning here. So first of all, I have this diagram in the upper right here because I think there's a lot of discussion and confusion around what these different terms mean. Artificial intelligence is actually quite an old term, and it's really referring to really any technique that enables computers to mimic human intelligence, right? So that could be in the storage of data, simple if-then-else rules. So really anything that we think about that computers do could in some way be considered artificial intelligence. Some people use artificial intelligence to describe more of what here is called deep learning. But really deep learning is a subset of artificial intelligence. Machine learning is also a subset of artificial intelligence that really looks at different statistical techniques that can do some of the heavy lifting of decision making and also improve over time. So we're using machine learning, for example, in the generation of segmentation and optimization around price. I have an example of that. I would say that's really where the frontier is right now with regards to price optimization. There are different people trying things out with deep learning, although deep learning as a field really has shown its effectiveness mainly in more kind of focused areas like image recognition or beating people at chess or Go or things like this, where there's less kind of factors and less possibilities. And you can kind of focus it more on a specific task and use these neural nets to kind of churn through data and make decisions. So I think deep learning starting to get there, but it's still not quite there. So, but machine learning has proven success. Really, when you look at the implications, dynamic pricing, and when you think about the other parts of it, that we had talked about too, with omni-channel and sales going away, the order taker sales reps going away, the dynamic pricing is really becoming more and more table stakes in a lot of industries, right? And we have this kind of evolution from pricing and price setting to pricing science, and now using machine learning to take some of the manual steps out of it and take on some of the heavy lifting and be able to have self-improving models is where things are developing now and heading in the future. And one of the key things here to remember, though, is that the data that you have might not be enough to do a good job at this, right? In general, you're talking about needing more types of data, and the more data, the better. Obviously, you need the right data. You can't just throw data at it and expect that that's going to improve things. But in a lot of cases, the transactional data and customer product data that you have might not be enough. You have to factor in other things like competitive data or other outside factors that can influence purchase behavior and willingness to pay. So that's one of the key considerations here if you're going to do this. And I think at some point I'll do a presentation on that's a deeper dive into this, and I've done a couple already within our our community, but perhaps we can do one of those as a follow-up to this, to kind of double click on this area. So this is a kind of a machine learning example of how you can use machine learning for segmentation and optimization. And I didn't want to get too in depth here because it's a very complex topic. But the basic idea is that you can build a kind of segmentation model by looking at different dimensions and how those things influence willingness to pay. And you can do that, manually, using a statistician or a data scientist or a pricing scientist, or you can have that person kind of plug some things into a machine learning model and have the machine learning model come up with, data-driven recommendations. Now, so creating that model, we do believe it shouldn't entirely be data-driven. There still is a need for pricing science and data science here. So the way that we've approached it is to create kind of a rich framework of tools that allow those people to do a better job and to do more with in a faster period of time, and have more of a self-improving model than kind of a one-time exercise where you just plug it in and then have to have a person come back in and redo it. But that's the creation of the model really, if you think about either from a like kind of clustering perspective of grouping together like products and customers, or you think about it as kind of a decision tree where you're trying to look at different dimensions of customers and products and transactions and figure out what drives willingness to pay. A person can do that and a machine can help, right? And then once you come up with a model, then you can there's a good machine learning framework can then do training of that model to figure out how good it is, and then basically then you test the model with data that you haven't exposed to it, that you haven't built the model off of, to then see how good it is in kind of real world situations that haven't been used to generate the model, right? And then you get kind of a confidence level, then you can continue to hone that and tune it over time by doing testing and kind of flagging where you're seeing results that aren't aligned with the model and that kind of thing. So hopefully that's a lot of ground to cover in one slide or kind of a very short period of time, but hopefully that gives you kind of a sense of how these things can be used to develop a segment model, optimize pricing, measure the response that you're getting in the actual, and then kind of improve and tune that model over time.
Yeah, and I liked one thing you said, kind of about the flexibility of of your solution, and then letting the pricing professional, the pricing scientist, use that to their advantage, than coming in and trying to put in something that, that a tool that knows better than that pricing person who's worked in that industry or that company for years.
Right.
I really like that that take, because I think far too often people come in and try to tell us pricing professionals, well, we can, put in numbers and, tell you what's a better price point, without
Right.
understanding all the different factors and taking everything into consideration.
Yeah, I agree.
But getting into something you said the other day, about one of your current customers using this, I think there's a real need for for this, and there's a lot of companies that are kind of taking advantage of other companies who aren't using this, and taking advantage of companies who are only working, their pricing teams work Monday through Friday. Can you tell that story, because I really like it?
Yeah, sure. So we have a customer that's competing against a company that's at the forefront of algorithmic and dynamic pricing, and uses a lot of these types of techniques, and they ended up implementing our solution and started to compete against them and do this kind of algorithmic and dynamic pricing. And one of the things that they uncovered was this trend, and what they saw was their competitors were actually dropping their price at 4:30 p.m. every Friday. And knowing that this was in Europe, and the labor laws are pretty strict there in terms of number of hours, so everyone kind of leaves at the same time, and they knew that, so they would drop their prices, capture all of these sales over the weekends, and then raise their prices back up at 8 a.m. on Monday. And before they were tracking, what was going on here, they never even knew what hit them, right? They just saw their sales decline every weekend, and they weren't sure why. And then when they look at the pricing, they'd say they didn't realize that they weren't competitive because they weren't dynamically matching those prices or even tracking what those prices were. So that was an interesting revelation that they used our application to actually uncover, and then just obviously to respond to. And by implementing the combination of the intelligence within the team, as well as the tools to be able to respond to those types of things, they're growing something like 35% quarter over quarter against that competitor right now. So doing quite well. So that's something that if you are competing against companies that are doing this, and you don't have that capability, it's just going to be a nightmare to try to keep up with it. You can only throw people at the problem so much, and it's going to increasingly get more and more dynamic and more sophisticated. And it's kind of like the stock market now, right? Like the vast majority of the trades are happening algorithmically, right? So if you're coming in without that, it's like showing up with
a newspaper.
Back in
the day with stock prices.
I think Buffett still used the newspaper, but he's kind of the wizard, right? But otherwise, you're bringing a knife to a gunfight, and that's increasingly what's happening.
Well, I think for companies too, don't wait until you have to. Be the one that pushes that forward, and take the one that takes advantage of somebody else not having a dynamic pricing team, or even even just a team that isn't using Excel.
Yeah.
So
agreed. All right, so we're running a little short on time here, so I'll accelerate this a little bit so we can get to your slides. But in terms of what this means for pricing solutions, I mean, really, I think that if you don't have an omni-channel pricing solution going forward, it's going to be a challenge. If you have one of these more point solutions that's not good at kind of handling all the facets around pricing, whether that be on invoice, off invoice, quoting, configuration, through channels, direct to consumer, that's going to be a challenge. You really need both a broad solution as well as a deep solution. I think increasingly you will need machine learning enabled solution to be able to act more dynamically. It has to be agile and flexible, and it needs to be integrated and have an open data model so they can plug into all these different sources of data, more of which are unstructured. You can use some of the machine learning techniques to create structure from unstructured data in some cases, but that integration, that openness is key, because even in today's world, pricing solutions are always integrated with, ERP and CRM systems, but the need for that integration, is only going to increase going forward, and you're going to get more and more types of data that you're going to want to plug into those models. So we're going to shift now a little bit towards the organizational aspect, and this is something that I came across recently from Jeffrey Moore, called his digital systems maturity model. And what he talks about is kind of moving from, along these different levels of sophistication, from systems of records all the way through systems of disruption. And the point here is that it's really they're building blocks, right? And so depending on where you are, the idea is to kind of use this framework to understand, one, where you are, and then where you need to be, and where you're potentially open to disruption in your industry. So I took this and gave some examples here, but then I thought it'd be interesting, and Chris and I kind of liked this idea to use in terms of pricing, right? So and so I've kind of co-opted it for that purpose here, and basically said, the first building block here is really having a system of record for price, right? Some companies don't even have that, right? They're pricing in Excel. It's all over the place. They don't even know what prices are necessarily being paid for different things. Hopefully, at least you have an ERP system. But some companies have multiple ERP systems, and so the first thing is, that first building block is just getting a handle, getting control over over your pricing, right? And then it's about like having these systems of engagement. So CPQ is a pricing specific system of engagement where you're engaging with customers and kind of managing that process and that collaborative process on coming to price. There's other things like Slack and Chatter and things like that that are obviously in that realm as well. Engagement analytics, so things like usage data for SaaS, event data, so understanding that customer kind of path and things like that, especially in a digital format, is kind of the next step there. And then building on top of that, that's when you're bringing in things like price optimization and machine learning. And then when you can do that, and if you're really kind of want to disrupt with regards to price, that's where having a unified omni-channel pricing strategy and doing things like value or pricing as a service can really disrupt your industry, right? So these questions actually are directly from Jeffrey Moore, but I thought they were very applicable to our discussion today in terms of thinking about where your organization is today, where's your company's exposure to digital disruption required to be tomorrow. So who's going to come in and push on certain areas of your business with maybe a digital first or digital only model, and really think about where you're open to that and where you need to be in order to compete against it. And then obviously what it's going to take to get you there. So one of those areas in terms of what it's going to take is kind of an evolution of the pricing discipline itself. And I'm going to hand it off to Chris here to talk about where things are going there.
Yeah, I mean, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head with some of this stuff. Far too often, what I see and what I hear from 9 out of 10 companies I work with is, well, our pricing function isn't as advanced as you would think. And my response is always, well, I guarantee I know exactly where you are and can understand why, because most companies are, from my research, 60% of companies are still using Excel, and they're still at that first kind of step, working their way towards that second step. They've got their ERP system, they've got analysts going in and extracting data and running big Excel spreadsheets, and that's kind of where a lot of companies are. And I think as a pricing profession, we need to be honest with ourselves about where we are and where we need to be competitive going forward, and how we need to do that. So one of the things that I've kind of been seeing and is in talking with Gabe and seeing where the future of pricing is going, and the question that I always get is where does a pricing professional team sit? Where does a pricing professional go with their career? Really, what we're seeing with this omni-channel kind of progression of things is that it's truly heading towards marketing. I mean, right now, in the most recent survey I did, finance and marketing were almost tied. And I could bet if we did the same thing 10 years ago, it would be 95% finance, because that's where all the purchase data sat. They controlled the numbers. It was cost plus. Now with e-commerce and all the data that pricing professionals need is shifting more towards marketing. Understanding the conversions, the click rates, where people are coming from, understanding all that stuff is really kind of, that data is sitting in marketing. So it only makes sense that we see a shift away from some of these other groups, and we see a shift towards the marketing team being where the pricing industry sits. So I'm happy to talk about that more, or if people have questions. I think obviously finance will still be a place where pricing professionals sit, given some of the industries. And then, what does this mean for pricing professionals? Going back to, being honest with ourselves, I think we need to realize that for the most part, we're a very reactive organization. We're working off of old data. We're very dependent on being Excel experts. I know myself, I've crashed a few computers because I tried to overwork Excel. We're spending too much time creating reports that can be generated with software. We're wasting resources trying to find the problem. We've got an analyst, and we're making an assumption about what's going on, why we're seeing a dip in or an increase in discounts, or why we're seeing loss in a certain area, and we're having an analyst go dig with Excel and pull different information and trying to validate or understand that. We've got large deal desk teams and long approval times. So I think we need to be honest and really kind of push towards the future, which is being proactive, real-time decisions. And by that I mean, setting up the price points, setting up the pass, understanding what the customers are going to want, getting all those prices ready so that, when you do have a tool that can take an advantage, you can have those already pre-programmed in there. I think the pricing professional is going to need to have a deep understanding of data analytics. You may not be the person programming it, but you need to understand where the data is coming from and how to collect the right data and what you need. I think we're going to be more of a strategic function, more time spending with other teams, gaining that buy-in, explaining what's going on, more help on the product side, building the products or validating products before they're built, as far as price points, doing more of the market research, doing more of the understanding of the values and how customers perceive our products. And then, really kind of dynamic pricing. And so kind of at the bottom I've got, we need to move away from Excel and Access and move into, pricing solutions for the purpose of this discussion. Obviously I put Pricefx's name down there, but we need to move to that. We need to make our lives easier, and we need to get out of the old way of thinking that it's pricing software is something that only the biggest companies can buy and can afford and should be using, whereas it's something that we all need to use. We all need to embrace that this is coming, and we can't do it, like as you said before, by just throwing headcount at problems. It's not sustainable going forward. We really need to make that shift. Some companies are already there, on their way there. Different industries are further along, and they may already be in this future, or that's why I said advanced state. And we the rest of the industry needs to catch up, or the other industries need to catch up. So I think we're running towards the end of time. If people want to stay on, ask questions, have Gabe answer some of the questions, please stay with us. If not, if you don't have any questions, thanks for coming, thanks for listening. If you've got to run to another meeting and want to ask us a question later, feel free to reach out to either Gabe or myself. We're happy to take kind of questions offline, and if I don't answer your question, I'll make sure to follow up with an email to kind of address it afterwards. So thank you, and stay on the line if you want us to kind of go over some of your questions. And my apologies for whatever reason, GoToWebinar, the question box is tiny, so it may take me a little while to get to some of these. Um, so, kind of first question for you, Gabe. What will be your take on accommodating regional differences and tweak pricing? Kind of Amazon is strong on this proponent of.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we have a number of customers that are kind of, have overall, either like for a theater or for a country, have a specific price, and then are tweaking things for, regionally, based on, the market dynamics. That, I think that's it. It does depend obviously on what you're selling and how much transparency there is, and how those channels work. I think there's certainly a case to be made for that, and you can use our solution to do that. Obviously, you need to be a bit careful about, when you think about omni-channel pricing, you have to have some consistency and some, I'd say, reasoning or strategy, behind why you're doing that, right? So in certain industries, I think it makes a lot of sense. In other industries, it's harder to pull off. But I think, generally people, will accept different prices for different things. When you, at first, people are a little bit kind of sometimes emotional about that. You get an emotional response to, like, why are you charging me more because I live in California versus, someone else that lives in Missouri? Why do they get to pay less? Well, obviously there's, a higher cost of living, higher cost of labor, more taxes, things like that, that people start to, okay, that makes sense. Or when you also explain to people that they're already paying more for, gas in every state, right? You're paying, more for a movie here than in Missouri, right? And even if, depending on when you go to the movie or how old you are, you're paying a different price. So, I certainly think that people, are getting more and more used to this idea of dynamic pricing that varies by, different attributes of who you are as a customer, and depending on the industry. And happy to talk more in detail about that specific industry and use case offline, and what makes sense there and what can be done.
Kind of tying that in, kind of weather and other factors, kind of bringing that into kind of the mix of.
Yeah, I mean, certainly there's, in different categories, what you're selling is dependent on, factors like the weather, and having a solution that's easy to integrate and pull in, data like that, can certainly be useful. So, you're not going to sell a lot of, snow chains in, in California in June, right?
Yeah.
So that's, except in certain regions where, if you're still going up to the mountains, there might be some areas where you need it. But so yeah, I think having that understanding of the usage and consumption patterns, and there's also this idea of moving supply around, to different areas, right? So depending on things like the weather or other events that might be driving certain demand.
What a question about, I think it kind of plays into a little bit of your background, but consumer psychology and behavioral economics, how are they kind of changing the pricing toolbox?
That's a great question. I think that's actually one of the, I think, exciting things about e-commerce, right? Is that you look at some of the work that is coming out of Cambridge and other places with regards to psychometrics, and how you can profile people based on either their past behavior or kind of navigation, or where they're coming from, or things like their Facebook profile, and kind of make some some assumptions about who they are from those things. The other area obviously that you can play around with here, particularly on the front end, is around the presentation of price. And so I've seen some white papers, for example, that kind of have done some studies that show, depending on how the price is actually displayed to people, that there'll be a different perception in their mind over that same price point. So I think that this area is kind of ripe for both exploration, as well as driving some additional profitability from a pricing perspective. And that's definitely something that we're doing some experimentation around to see what kind of results we can get out of that.
A question on what is their position on price transparency with regards to the race to the bottom.
So I think the the race to the bottom is always a concern with regards to algorithmic pricing and dynamic pricing. I think that you have to put certain. I think actually on the other side, it can be a concern too on going too crazy with dynamic pricing. Like, so there was a story that got a lot of press out here in San Jose a couple years ago, where a guy got charged $452 or something for a 12-mile Uber ride from a Sharks game. And while that might have made sense based on whatever demand model that they had built to get more drivers out there or what have you, they basically took the entire lifetime value of that customer out in that one transaction. Right? I'm pretty sure that guy's never going to take Uber again. If there's any possible alternative, he'll take that. And so, I think there needs to be constraints for these models to operate within, so both on the high side as well as the low side. So a lot of our customers, they'll put in things like a margin floor, or a competitive kind of price, to bound what the optimization algorithm does. So I think you shouldn't set up any algorithm that has the possibility to race to the bottom, right?
Yeah.
Because it will. And there's been examples even of like Amazon, where they have algorithmic pricing setting up, and they're with some of their low value items. I saw a white paper one time where they had a specific academic book that they basically two algorithmic pricing routines were running against each other, and just kept upping the price up and up and up, and it was like $1.2 million, right?
Yeah.
But similarly, you don't want it to keep going down either. So it's not just about matching competitive pricing. It's also about looking what your competitors are doing when you move pricing to and you can ascertain some things over are you a market leader or not? You might think you are, but is the market treating you as a market leader? If you are, then you can move pricing up, and your competitors should follow, right? And so it's not just about matching competitive pricing. It's also about kind of this whole game theory and prisoner's dilemma, where you want to be more strategic about it than just like having a simple price matching routine.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned game theory. I think there's so much of that, especially in the B2B side of things, and understanding how what your price change is going to do. And I always kind of refer back to kind of some of the work that Simon Kucher has done about everyone kind of thinks that they're in a price war, and that the other side started it.
80% or something.
Yeah,
yeah.
I need to defer to Madhavan and some of those guys, but yeah, I mean, everybody kind of thinks they're in a price war and thinks the other guy started it, and sometimes your customers are willing to pay more or not, depending on, like you said, market leader. All right, well, I think we're already almost 10 minutes over. Got most of the questions. Other questions we'll follow up with offline. My apologies for whatever reason. I can only see one line at a time of like 4 or 5 words, so it's hard to see all the questions. So we'll follow up with people with questions, with other questions, and we appreciate everybody for joining. And if you have any other questions or anything like that, feel free to reach out to Gabe or myself. Thanks, everybody.
All right, thanks, everyone.